Good afternoon, intuitives. I've been mulling around an idea in my head for a couple days while I've been reflecting on my own past. And, the old adage, I wish I knew then what I know now. And I want to get into that in terms of abuse. Basically, this video is going to be about trying to understand why it takes time to understand the abuse you went through and why you couldn't come to that conclusion when it was actually going on. So first, to that point, when it's going on, you most likely don't have the full picture, but more about that later. Really, I want to start with when you're in that abuse environment, like if you're in a job where you're being exploited, a job where you're being bullied and hazed in a paramilitary style organization like a fire department, or if you're being forced to work long hours and all that, you're usually going to be in a culture where, and especially if you're new in the industry trying to make your name, so to say, you're going to be in a culture that basically enforces that, like, you have no right to say no, that you have to, quote, put your time in, which means that you're not experienced in this industry. It doesn't matter your education or stuff. By that they mean you haven't been in this culture very long, so you don't know that we're exploiting you, that we're taking advantage of you. And narcissists and abusers will use that to their advantage. They'll use somebody's naivete or fledgling status in an industry and basically try to imply and reinforce that the abuse, exploitation, and wrongdoing being done to you is just simply part of the culture. It's the status quo, and everybody goes through it. And don't dare speak up, or we'll ruin your career. You'll never work in this industry again, kind of thing. Or there'll be repercussions. Or it is what it is, and this is what you signed up for, which is usually just code for, we know we're doing something wrong, but you don't know any better yet, so we're going to get away with it while we can. And that's a big part, being in an abusive environment, like I said, especially if you don't know any better, especially in a work environment. If you're new to that environment and that culture, you don't know any better, and you'll defer to the people with seniority. And sadly, a lot of times those people in general won't speak up at the time. Like, if somebody's being abused, the people around you usually won't speak up at the time because they'll fear retaliation. And honestly, that's understandable. I mean, in my situation, I'm sure most people on this channel have taken a look at my story. Those that spoke up about what was happening to me are now have been facing retaliation since they spoke up, and are still facing retaliation, and nothing's being done to protect them. So there is that dynamic too, and the narcissist, the abuser, counts on that. They count on the fact that their status, their seniority in an industry will protect them, and basically, make them seem like this made man type that can do what they want without question, and no one would dare question them for fear of retaliation or destroying their career. So you have to understand that, and that's a big part of going through abuse, is that you're made to think while it's going on that, oh no, there's nothing wrong with this. They're allowed to do this. You can't say no. You can't ask for anything, and you just have to take it. It's, like a initiation process or something to get to where you want to be. And in a lot of cases, unfortunately, we put up with it because, like, take my example, I wanted to be a professional firefighter since I was 18 years old, and I got cheated out of my chance after I got hired at 19 in 2006. And then the recession came, and there were hiring freezes for years, and then when they were testing again, I got shot and had to recover from that for a couple years. So here I am finally getting my chance, and I was 33. I'm getting up there in age to be starting a career like that. I figured this is my shot, and everything that was going on. I'm not going to get into details again. Stories on here and link to the article. And also, remember, civil case, so can't really get into details. Um, I thought, hey, I have to put up with this. Like, this is something I just have to push through. And once I'm through being in the academy, through my, like, probationary phase, that I'll be full-fledged and then this won't happen. But you put up with it because you think you have to get what you want, and that if you don't put up with it and speak out about it, you'll get burned and you'll never have, the career you want. So there's that aspect. And you there's a lot of mental too. We as people, particularly as, empaths, try to like give people the benefit of the doubt, and we are hardest on ourselves more than anybody else. INFJs, ENFJs, you understand what I'm talking about? We hold people to a high standard, but we hold ourselves to the highest standard. So a lot of times in an abuse situation, we have this like subconscious feeling like, what am I doing wrong? What's wrong with me that no one else can see? So that's usually a large part of it. Now, as it continues to go on and you start to mentally deteriorate, those around you may not speak up about what's going on, like as it's going on, but they'll talk to you privately, like when you're not at work or something, and people will start to tell you that, this is wrong and something has to be done. I know from experience how terrifying it is to speak out, but you got to do it. It's the only way. Like, in systems like this that continue abuse and try to make it the norm and like it's no big deal, they're going to protect that status quo until the very end. Only when, you speak out, and not just like reporting them within the organization. I mean like going public to make it where they can't sweep it under the rug, and then people are going to know about it and there's going to be backlash. That's the only way to get things to change. And believe me, it is very empowering. After it's terrifying, it's empowering to know, especially when things start to change, that you were brave enough to speak up. You let the truth be known. You ripped the mask off these abusers, and you broke the status quo. And now, nobody else is going to have to go through what you went through. And as empaths, that is a really good feeling once you get through the terror. And that's, like a shitty thing about abuse is you can't understand it as it's going on. You have to get out of that environment, reflect, that'll bring things up, and then you got to talk to other people who were around that witnessed it, reflect some more, and only then does it really start to make sense. Do you really like totally feel the emotions of what were going on? Because while it's going on, you kind of go numb. INFJs, the NFJs, we dissociate, especially us INFJs. We dissociate and escape in here and really don't deal with what feelings we're really feeling at the time. We press it down into a point where either it's so bad that we break, which in a lot of times, like with bullying and hazing, that's their main goal. They want to break you, so because they don't want you in their club. um, Either break, or it becomes so much that you can't stuff it down anymore. I mean, that's really a big part of it too. So after you get through that phase, understand that you have to reflect. Like, yeah, we overthink all the time. That's a big part of who we are. But in situations like this, thinking again and again, maybe even writing it down, I suggest, to seek professional help as well. They can help you understand things way faster than you can on your own. You have to understand it on your own first, and that's why channels like this are important. Other people who've been through situations like you may going through, speaking up and telling their stories. It's comforting to know that you're not the only one who's ever spoke up, and that other people speaking up lets you know that in certain cases speaking up does help and does make a change. And like I said, I'll tell you from my personal experience, I do feel better now that my truth is out there. I'm sure a lot of other people, like the actors who spoke up in the whole Me Too movement will probably tell you the same. So again, reflection. And there is a problem with that. And that's sometimes even like right after you get out of that environment, you don't have all the information. And, we're intuitives. Our brain works by connecting patterns and putting puzzles together. Well, you can't understand patterns or puzzles if it's not all revealed to you yet. So sometimes it may take some time, like, I don't just mean a couple days, I mean weeks, months, even years to get the full picture about what was happening to you. Like hearing from people um, at your job or whatever, hearing things that were said about you by your abuser that you didn't hear, understanding their motivations as to why they were attacking you. It could be for many different reasons. It could be, they have a problem with females perhaps, or they have a problem with members of the LGBTQ community, or they have a problem because your religion is pagan witchcraft. People go after other people for all different things, but usually they have a narrow view of what they deem as acceptable, like what they deem is worthy of being in their club. These kind of abusers, particularly in a work environment, are gatekeeper type narcissists where they basically anoint themselves as the person who decides whether or not you're allowed in or not, regardless of your merit. Just, personality wise, do you fit their little mold of what people in that industry are supposed to be like? And will you not question the status quo? And that's what makes us INFJs and ENFJs dangerous, is because we are more than other people inclined to speak out against the status quo, whether it's something happening to ourselves or more so if something's happening to somebody else. We are way more inclined to speak up about somebody else being abused than ourselves. And we'll definitely would pull people aside and begin the processes like that. With narcissistic abuse in particular, it's first of all, it's very hard to understand that you're going through narcissistic abuse in the moment. You don't have all the pieces. You're probably being gaslit. So you have to understand what gaslighting is. You have to understand the general tactics that a narcissist uses and the terminology. And I've said it in previous videos, that's becoming easier to do. Like 10 years ago, there wasn't really YouTube channels or articles written about narcissistic abuse. It's a relatively new phenomenon. But don't beat yourself up if you just got out of an abusive situation and you're sitting there kicking yourselves, because we're hard on ourselves, about like, why did I let this happen to me? Why couldn't I see these signs? Why couldn't I put the pieces together? And being ashamed of yourself for letting it happen to you. Chances are, the person who was abusing you was being protected by the organization, and there were probably others complicit in the abuse that, they may not have been the person actively abusing you, but they could have been a co-conspirator of certain events, and they could have seen it all, and they did nothing, and them, as more senior people in your industry of a rank, had an obligation to do that. Understand, you didn't fail yourself. Everybody failed you. If nobody spoke up, or at the very least pulled you aside and told you, I've seen what's going on, I'll back you up if you speak out, but you're the victim, you have to do it. And that sometimes happens too. It happened in my case. But if nobody's doing anything, you didn't fail yourself. The people around you, everybody failed you, and the system itself that made abuse the status quo. If abuse and exploitation are considered a status quo in your industry or your company, then everybody else failed you. Everybody else failed you, and you can't fail anybody else, and also yourself. So I encourage you to take that time and reflect. If you've just gotten out of an abusive situation, chances are you probably don't understand everything that actually happened to you, at least not emotionally, and you probably don't understand the reasons and the motivations behind it because it takes time. And it's not just hearing things from other people that were around, it's taking that time to reflect and your inverted intuition putting those pieces of the puzzle together, and then you can finally see the clear picture. Another important point I want to mention is when you're being abused, I mentioned dissociation, but at times, you'll go numb and like almost black certain events out. So after getting out of that environment and finally feeling safe again, it'll start to come to the surface again. Things that happen to you, specific events that you may have blurred out, may come back more clearly. You may remember things that your abuser said to you that was either gaslighting or manipulation or bullying, and it'll make their other actions more clear to you. And the other thing that's very important is this is usually a pattern for people. Narcissists, abusers of any kind, whether, those who exploit people, those that are sexual abusers, those that, hit people, it's a pattern. You most likely are not their first victim. And they probably are very good at getting people to remain afraid to speak up out of fear of retaliation. If you hear, of your abuser having abused someone else, like you get a name saying like, Jane Doe was also an abuser, was abused by John Smith. Go try to find Jane Doe. Jane Doe may be afraid to speak up, but it's very comforting to speak to someone who went through what you went through. If you were abused by the same people, there's, that victim to victim sort of bond, because two victims of the same abuser will understand each other better than anybody else because abusers usually use the same tactics, the same playbook. That may also be crucial into understanding what you went through, because the other person who was abused by the same abuser might have recognized different patterns that you didn't, and vice versa. And when you can compare those notes, both of you's stories might be clearer than what it was just you reflecting on your own. And it might also empower the two of you to speak up together, because then neither one of you would feel alone in speaking up. And it's also great for as far as exposing an abuser, to prove that there was a pattern of behavior and it wasn't just a one-off thing that they went after you, because like I said, it rarely is. They usually keep abusing people until they're eventually stopped, and whether that's they get fired from a job, or if they're of any notoriety, their mask gets ripped off and they're exposed for what they really are, and they lose all credibility, as they rightfully should, and people can see them for what they really are, and they can't hide anymore. Their lying tactics, their manipulation tactics won't work anymore, at least not nearly as well. So I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to try to make videos a little more often now that I'm getting used to my new schedule. Anybody who sends me an email, I'll get to it tomorrow. That's my day off. I work 6 days a week now. Just remember, it takes time. Do not beat yourself up if you don't understand it just a few days after you get that out of that environment. And understand that most people don't understand what they were actually going through in depth while it was going on, because you were busy just trying to survive it. You weren't trying to understand it. You were just busy trying to survive it, because you were basically told you have no right to say no and you cannot speak up. And if you do, you will lose the most important thing in your life. Like as INFJs and ENFJs, particularly in careers, that's a big part of our sense of purpose and our identity. So the idea that if we try to do the right thing and stop the abuse, that they would take that away from you forever. The thing you hold most dear, as I said, being a professional firefighter was the thing I wanted most. The only thing I value more than that would be finding unconditional love and still searching for that blue rose. So They know that. Your abusers know that, because they're not going to go after somebody who doesn't really care less, like, about a career. Like, if the retaliation is going to be they're going to ruin your career, if they know the career you're in where you're being abused isn't that important to you, that person most likely won't be a target, because what does that person have to lose to speak up? You know what I mean? If they don't care that their dream job is forever ruined, what do they care? They're more likely to speak up. So that your abuser most likely knows how important a career is to you, or something else also, like your reputation or status in a certain area. And that's why they target you, because you value that so much that, that they deep down they know you won't speak up. And especially in cultures where you're basically told you can't say no, and you're not allowed to ask for anything, and you just got to sit there and take it because you don't have any seniority in the industry and you're new and it's their club. And if you can't get through this, then maybe you just won't, maybe you're just not cut out for this. Like, you were hired in a class of 20 out of over 1,000 that tested. There's plenty other people that will sit there and go through this, if you can't hack it. That sort of thing, as a for instance. So remember, it's not your fault. You have to take time to reflect, talk to people you trust, and the pieces will start coming together. And then when you feel ready, speak up. Speak up not just for your own empowerment, but speak up so the same thing doesn't happen to you. Like I said, if you're struggling about trying to put the pieces together for something, a good place to start is videos on abuse, videos on narcissistic abuse. Also speak to a mental health professional. Just don't try to rush it. It will take time. It probably will take months after being out of that environment to be in a place where you've put enough pieces together that you're ready to speak to people about what you went through and try to express the emotions you felt, what you're now truly feeling for the first time, because you repressed them out of a sense of survival. Thanks everybody for listening. Like I said, I felt like this was sort of an important one for those who have been abused, because especially if it was relatively recent, you may not understand this. Please check out my other videos, like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.